So, good morning, everyone. We will start our parallel session number one, how to prepare a bankable project. This session, as you will see, and I will talk about that in a while, will be mostly about our financial masterclass. It's a kind of a teaser of our financial masterclass, where I have two of my colleagues that will be presenting, that I will introduce later on. I would just like to now speak a little bit about the housekeeping rules. If you could move the slide, please. Thank you. So basically, please mute yourself and keep the camera off during the presentations to minimize the background noise, etc. But your comments, um, all your intervention is very welcome. So there will be a time for Q&A. Whenever you have a question, just write it on the chat, or at the end you will be able to unmute yourself and make those questions for everyone if you feel that is the need. In case that we do not have the time to answer all your questions, we will you can drop us an email, or just when you make your question, put your contacts and we will answer you by email. So next slide, please. Just a last note here that is relevant. The session is being recorded, so if for some reason you don't feel comfortable, let us know, but this is relevant to mention that the session will be recorded. I think that you are seeing my slides now. Tomaso and Eelco, please confirm. Yes. So thank you. Now moving on. First of all, welcome on board. It's really a pleasure to have you here. We will start the session, and the session I will give a small introduction. So my name is Jorge. I'm one of the matchmaking experts of the Smart Cities Marketplace, and after me I will have Eelco. Eelco is also one of the matchmaking. Basically, we are three matchmaking experts. Eelco is from DNV, is very experienced on these topics, and we will be presenting the Smart City Guidance Package that was also co-written by him, and that will give the framework as an overall framework for a bankable project. And then we will have Tomaso from Bankers Without Boundaries to speak about the viability of projects, so key requirements to be considered from the point of view of an investor. And then, as I mentioned, we will have time for Q&A, so you will have time for your questions. Please do not hesitate to put them on the chat, or to use your voice during the Q&A session. So I would like to give a step back and speak a little bit about the Smart Cities Marketplace and what it is and where this action fits in. So basically, the Smart Cities Marketplace is an initiative from the European Commission, which is developed on this four-step approach that I presented here. We call it the Engage, Explore, Shape, and Deal. And the aim here is that we support municipalities, especially small or mid-sized municipalities, the one that have more lack of knowledge or have more lack of resources. So we support them towards the bankability of their projects, meaning that towards the fact that those projects can be financed by third parties or different kind of models of financing. And for that, we like to engage all the parties here, explore different opportunities. So showing you, for instance, with solution booklets and other resources that we have available, to show you different projects or similar projects to yours, where you can inspire yourself, where you can adopt the best practice. And then shape is where we try to give some technical assistance, some support for the projects, in order to shape to improve your project, and then the deal is the matchmaking with the investors. So those are the steps that we try to bring to the table. For that, we have designed what we call a customer journey. Those customer journeys are basically we will check your projects or your ideas, and we will see what kind of requirements you need for that. And through that pre-assessment, through that process, we will say, okay, you need to have mentoring, or you need to have this type of support, and we will try to provide you those types of support. So this is to say that we don't have one size fits all kind of approach. The approach will be tailored to the needs of the applicants. For that, we will have a call for applications. So cities or city-led consortia. So this means that can be several cities together, can be cities with private parties, cities with NGOs, different kind of stakeholders. As long as there is a commitment from one city involved in the process, can apply for this technical assistance, and we will provide this technical assistance. The application is now open. It's continuous open, to be fair. There are cutoffs. The next cutoff will be on the 31st of March. So you can apply until there. Then we will have a process to evaluate the proposals and to see who goes to this technical assistance. Who can apply? So basically, we are focusing on mid-sized cities or small cities, as I mentioned, but larger cities are also welcome. All the countries that are eligible for Horizon Europe are eligible for this initiative. So you can apply if you are involved in one of these process. As I mentioned, business, SMEs, startups, those kinds of companies are also welcome to join this consortium and to support the cities. And investors are more than welcome, because at the end of the day, we are talking about bringing private investors to the table. So investors are more than welcome to be part of the process. And what kind of assistance do we have? What kind of tools do we have to provide? So we have the matchmaking events, exactly what's happening here. It's a matchmaking event where we try to bridge projects with investors, to have these discussions, to have these sessions where we help project developers, cities to improve their projects. Then we have the financial master classes, which is a 2 days approach, and these financial master classes, I will invite you all to join. So those are free financial master classes where we have investors, project developers, so in best practice. So we will have basically develop more what we will be presenting today. Also, we have one-to-one consultancy service, technical, financial, legal, depending on the kind of needs that the city have, and peer-to-peer exchange, so that we can bring peers together in order to improve their project. At the end of the day, what we want is to bring those projects to investors, so that they are encouraged to invest on those projects. So we have an investor network that is expanding. Today, I got the news of a pioneer also that will join our network. So this network is expanding every day, and this network will be invited to know more about your project and to see whether they have interest or not, if you fulfill their requirements or not, to invest in your project. Just some key key numbers that are relevant now. So we have during the last years, 127 projects have been matched with investors, and those represent 600 or more than 600 million of euros of investment. So those are the figures until now that we are trying to grow every day. So this is my last slide before I move to my colleagues. our financial masterclass will happen in April on the 20th and 9th of May. So it's a 2 days approach, more or less 2 days approach. You are invited to go on our website and know a little bit more, or just drop us an email to register yourself. Now I would like to give the floor to my colleagues. I will start with Eelco, that will introduce himself. Eelco will talk about the climate neutral and smart city guidance package, which is a framework for a good project. So Eelco, the floor is yours. You can share now your screen.
Thank you. Yes, if all is okay, I'm now sharing the screen. So
yes, it's working.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so indeed, my name is Eelco Kruizinga, based in the Netherlands. I'm actually with an organization that's called DNV, which is a Norwegian organization, stands for Det Norske Veritas, and a lot of the work that we do is to help de-risk projects, especially in the energy space. So we do lots of due diligence on energy project proposals as well, across the full spectrum of energy sort of carriers and energy sort of infrastructure as well. You know, spanning from solar all the way to hydrogen as well. So that's typically our normal work. Within the Smart Cities Marketplace project, I'm also indeed, as Jorge says, contributing to the matchmaking, contributing to the knowledge management, and also the web platform of the marketplace as well. Now, the topic that I'm addressing in this particular session is as Jorge was saying, that the Smart City guidance package. Now, what is that? It's basically, let's call it a cookbook. Let's call it a cookbook. It's literally a cookbook of, you know, very extensive, 200 pages, a cookbook that helps you as a city representative to develop a framework in which investable projects can thrive. And that's, I think, that's a link with the finance element. So if you have, you know, develop a framework, an integrated framework, a portfolio of projects that has a certain set of characteristics, the chances that these projects can be de-risked is higher. So that's the importance of the topic. I will just in a few slides explain what this guidance package looks like and how you can use it. Now, first of all, so the findings that we had over the last few years in the Smart Cities Marketplace is that we learned that what is needed to create a smart, climate neutral cities this probably can be summarized in 6 points here. So first of all, it's a timing point. So an integrated approach that is not per se bound by the 4-year political cycle, because as you may know, projects that have the nature to sort of in the energy or the mobility or in the ICT space, have a much longer timeline than the 4 years of a political cycle. So it's really important to have a framework in your city, a strategic framework that is not bound by that timeline. And I do know, and Tomaso will confirm that investors like that. So to have certainty around what is going to happen in the city, whether there will be support not only from the city hall but also from local stakeholders as well. So to go beyond that 4-year political election cycle is important as a de-risking element. So that's one, timing. Also, projects should not be sort of considered in isolation, because as you may know, smart city projects involve a lot of sectors as well. It's just definitely never a one sector type of approach. So involvement of a multitude of government as well as business sectors is a key element as well for a successful portfolio of smart city / climate neutral projects within your city. So that's 2, involvement and of a multitude of stakeholders. Also, a very important element is acceptance of the technologies that you deploy in your city, and acceptance lies very much with clearly your local stakeholders, not only your citizens but local businesses. So if there's support for your local wind farm, actually when I look out the room, out of the window here, there's a plan to build 2 large wind turbines, 120 meters high, just 500 meters from here. Now, was I involved in this? Maybe not too much. So it's important to have, involvement of citizens in the changes you make in your local environment. Fourthly, an element of making sure that you are not sort of betting on a one-trick pony. So it's definitely a multitude of technologies that you need to be able to create this smart city environment and to create this climate neutral city as well. So you will be addressing a multitude of technologies that are needed to make real progress. Now, fifthly, and that's probably music to Tommaso's ears, is what we have found over the years is that a lot of thinking goes into these projects, but maybe not a lot of thinking at an early stage around business cases and models. So how the project can sustain itself beyond sort of design and sort of the initial development. So how it can sort of survive and be sustainable over time, whether it can generate an income stream that is, is attractive enough to investors as well. So the thinking around business cases models at an early stage is highly recommended, and that's definitely a lesson learned that we drew from the sort of the work with cities in the Smart Cities Marketplace. And then lastly, maybe it should have come as the first point, to have clear targets, and not only have clear targets, but also have a process of monitoring targets, and have the flexibility to adapt if things go in another way than you might have expected. So those 6 points, I think, are sort of key lessons learned from the last probably 5, 6, 7 years in the Smart Cities Marketplace. Now, what we have tried to do with stakeholders is to translate these lessons learned into let's call it a dummies. Well, it's a bit a dummies guide that's sort of like layman's language, easy language with clear to-dos. As I said, as a cookbook for city professionals as well, and that's exactly what has happened. And I will tell you a little bit about the structure of this guidance. Now, so what happened is actually that 2 pieces of guidance have been developed. So the first piece of guidance is that is the most extensive one. That's the 200-pager. It was developed in 2019. It's called the Smart City Guidance Package. It is available on the Smart Cities Marketplace website. And basically, that is an inspirational document, and as I said, a self-help guide for integrated planning and implementation of a portfolio of smart city projects. It was produced through the involvement of many experts from across Europe, and it's definitely based on the experiences of cities, basically to help other cities and to avoid to avoid repetition of the same mistakes all over. You should bear in mind it's not a technical guide. We have other things in the Smart Cities Marketplace that could sort of address particular technologies. Those are called solution booklets. I would sort of recommend to have a look at our site to have these primer sort of little guidances on certain technologies. Now, the Smart Cities Guidance Package is not a technology guide. It is a process guide, a recommended process to help develop a portfolio of projects. So that's the first piece of guidance, 2019, 200 pages. The second piece of guidance is a lot shorter. It's a summary that was developed in 2020. Although it is shorter, it also adds a bit of new insights, and the information that was added was especially on securing finance. So the combination of the 2 pieces of guidance, I think, sort of should help you to develop this portfolio of projects, and also be able to talk to investors in a smart way. There are 2 pieces of guidance, both available on the website. Now, the primary target good of both pieces of guidance are is basically the city hall primarily, so the mayor, politicians, but also supporting staff in your various departments, strategists, advisors, directors of unit, as well as project managers as well. So it's really addressed at that target group. Now, this was not like a, I mean, the development of the guidance was not like a ivory tower type of exercise. There's been extensive consultation in developing the guidance, so it's definitely grounded in practice, if you like. And here you see some pictures of the developmental process, that was basically done in 5 test beds across Europe. So where we involved many cities as well. So it's definitely not an academic exercise. I just want to highlight that as well. Now, so how is the guidance package organized? Well, the thinking was let's just hang it off a very sort of traditional plan, do, check, act, quality management type of cycle. So it's really sort of recognizable. So it consists of a number of steps, as you can see here in the big graphic here. So it starts with vision on the top, and then it sort of ends with replicate and scale up. And then it's fed back into sort of the visioning again. So it's really a loop, sort of an iterative process as well. And bear in mind, this whole package is aligned with the ISO 37104 standard on sustainable planning for cities. And I think that might be helpful as well for, in terms of de-risking of your activities towards investors. Now, let me just take a few minutes to take you through these various steps to get a feel for what we offer with this type of guidance. Now, each chapter in the guidance is set up with like with a graphic like what you see in the middle of this of the screen here. So it consists of a key question. So that is actually here. So stage 1, vision. So what is the question that is addressed in that particular stage of the guidance methodology? So the core question for stage 1 is, how do we see the city we are living in 20, 30, 50 years from now? So it's really a visioning type of question. It really goes beyond the 4 years. Then at the heart of the guidance, there's a series of what we call to-dos. So that what do you need to do in this stage 1 visioning stage? So it sets out a number of to-dos with practical tips and examples for how you could sort of execute those to-dos. And then on the top right, there's a set of tools that you could be using in delivering the to-dos, and it also highlights a number of standards that are relevant for this particular phase. And then lastly, obviously, in the sort of bottom right-hand corner, you see the various outputs of the stage. So it's really a very simple, as I said, a cookbook. So it starts off, with a series of stages, key question to be addressed in each of the stages, a set of to-dos with practical guidance, some offering of suggestions of tools you could be using, standards that are applicable for that particular stage, and an outline of the output that has been delivered by the stage. So the second step is decide and commit. So as soon as you have this big vision for the city, so how are you going to sort of meet the long-term objectives of the vision, and how can you sort of make that as like a smart type of approach? And in this phase, you start to develop a set of targets and clear goals, and you start to think about monitoring processes, and also you try to identify already what is the initial portfolio of potential projects in your city that could be delivering towards the vision as well. So the output of this stage is a validated, ranked, and operationalized action plans and topics for subcontracting out to the supply chain. And then the third stage is the planning stage. So you really then start to sort of action plan the portfolio of projects, and the output here is as well a sort of more detailed action plan from this stage. That's therefore called the planning stage. Then there's the do stage. What you need to do there clearly is to implement the action plan, and then of course, obviously, you will see some output in terms of clear impact on your KPIs as well. And then we have the check stage, which is basically checking whether you're sort of delivering towards your targets, whether your portfolio of projects is really contributing to the long-term vision, and also to identify what needs changing and adapting during execution as well. now, then you start to sort of act and sort of deliver the amendments, improvements that you want to realize, and of course, you try to draw some lessons learned from that as well. And then this actually goes beyond the PDCA cycle, because bear in mind you have a series of projects, but how can you maybe you have develop these projects on the scale of one street in your city, or maybe a city quarter or an area in your city. So how can you then sort of start to replicate that experience and grow that experience across the whole city, and maybe also together with other sort of urban areas within your municipality as well. So this is really about replication. So what can you learn from those pilots that you have undertaken? How can you sort of grow from pilots to sort of sustain, to steady state that is impactful for the entire city as well? Now, this was just a really, really brief introduction into the Smart City Guidance package. And what I should be saying, I said in my introduction, I'm also responsible for the web platform. What we are doing at the moment is actually to sort of transpose this whole document into what we are calling a wiki. So you will probably by the end of this month, and then over the next few months, we're starting to further develop that. You will see this whole guidance package as a series of web pages, interlinked web pages. So each of the to-dos is then linked to relevant, so inspiring projects. It's linked to relevant solution booklets, but it will also be linked to various types of discussion groups. And we call those focus and discussion groups, to which you actually can participate and sort of share amongst yourselves. Okay, how do you develop and implement the to-dos from the Smart Cities Guidance package as well? So it's really from a static document that was produced in 2019 to a sort of a more like a living online document that sort of grows over time as well. So that's one. Secondly, there's a self-assessment tool. And if you're interested in it, it's like a really simple Excel tool that you can be using. You score yourself against the various stages of the Smart Cities Guidance package, and you can see your, let's call it your maturity level against those to-dos. And it gives you basically an impression, a self-assessment of where you could be improving, where work needs to be done. So if you're interested, I could be sharing that self-assessment tool with yourselves. It's clearly also an element of our masterclass, as George was saying. We'll be doing some exercises with you around that self-assessment tool as well. But if you're not joining the masterclass and for some reason, you still sort of can have access to the self-assessment tool. George, that's it for me for now. If that's
Thank you. Thank you very much. So it was really good to have this overview for those that are interested on the masterclass. So basically, on the masterclass, we will dig into those steps, and we will make this more practical. So we will be using the tool that Eelco just mentioned here. This self-assessment Excel, where people will have the opportunity to check whether they are fulfilling their requirements or not, so where they can improve their project. Now I would like to give the floor to my colleague Tomaso to introduce himself, also from Bankers Without Boundaries, that will give a different view, so a view from the investors, key requirements, etc. So Tomaso, the floor is yours. You can now share your screen.
Great, thank you, George. Thanks, Eelco, for this overview of the project requirements. It was really interesting to see also the participatory approach that is taken throughout this creation. So thanks for that. So on my end, I'm Tommaso, Senior Analyst at Bankers Without Boundaries, which is a social enterprise concentrating on really power charging sustainable finance at all levels in Europe. Of course, partners of Smart Cities Marketplace and matchmaking experts in this sense. So let me share my screen. You should know.
Yes, perfect.
You should be able to see. Excellent. So, right. So for this session, the goal is to really give you an overview of what we consider financial bankability and viability, and ultimately what investors are looking for when presenting them with your project, let's say at the city level. Be a few main points. The first one is really to understand financial viability. Eelco has really stressed the point that many times there's very valuable projects being put forward, but there's not really a thought at the beginning on how they could generate revenue streams. So it's important to start from there. And then going to data availability, why it's that important, and what specific data we'll be looking for through the checklist for the city project managers. We'll close on with key recommendations, and the question that will be referring not just to my session, let's say, but to the 3 presentations that we just gave. So in terms of financial viability and the understanding of bankability, bankability is, of course, how financeable a project is, and it depends on many factors, especially data, returns on investment, clarity on risks, revenue streams, counterparty risks. So all of these elements that really should be thought of before even starting with a project, let's say. But sometimes, as we know, the goal is maybe takes the preeminence over these considerations. And investors might decide to invest in a project or not, depending on their risk level, how capable, how accepting of specific risks that are presented to them by projects are. Of course, market conditions and pricing. So bankability shifts. Having the same data, let's say, for the project, it can shift, it can evolve over time, depending on which investor we are referring to and the market conditions. So just to recap, we really want to focus on data disclosure, return of investment, and overall risk assessment. When it comes to data availability and disclosure, what are we really looking for? Why are we insisting on this point? Well, on the one hand, data disclosure and availability allows investor to assess creditworthiness. It allows them to understand and to compare projects between one another, so that the ones that are better prepared not to be they're hedging themselves best against default, they're hedging themselves against all these risks, are the ones which ultimately will attract their attention best. It allows the project to lay out all the key financial data, and that's really useful for the lifetime of the project, because we know that, especially at the European level, we like to think that valuable and impactful projects should just require grants or public contributions. But sometimes these public contributions are just not there. Sometimes the priorities shift. So it's important to potentially hedge ourselves and think about private contributions too, private investors too. And to do that, we need potential revenue streams. We need to have the capacity to pay back the investors, at least partially or in totality, of course, depending on the agreement that is being made. And finally, it helps to forecast future risks and costs. So it really helps establishing the lifetime of the project and its risks. The next point will be a checklist of project managers. So we're delving a bit more into the key elements and key details of it. So when it comes to really preparing for, let's say, the presentation of this project to investors, the first thing we will want to look at is cash flows, right? So are there already current cash flows that can be leveraged through the project, or are there future cash flow that can be leveraged to the project? It's not also enough to just have them. It's important that they're regular, of course, and the more the merrier, in the sense that as we know, if a service or a product is not only being let's say offered, but it can also be accessed both through selling and through subscriptions, or, like, let's say, different ways through which the product can be offered through the project. It really helps to strengthen and corroborate the solidity of such cash flows, and it hedges for the potential of the absence or the loss of a specific cash flow at some point in the lifetime of the project. Second, of course, is the costs. So are the current costs disclosed? What are the future ones? And do we expect the cost to hit in at specific points in time? It's really important to try and model that. Also, especially we live in very turbulent times, let's say from economic standpoints, to understand whether there are hidden costs that come out in the future or something that we're not even expecting. So this is important to try and anticipate that. And if at all, is there any opportunity for economies of scale if the project grows? So this generally allows to cut, let's say, baseline costs, potentially if the project manages to scale. In this modeling of cash flows and costs and everything, of which of course we expect that not every project will be able to do, and that's also where Smart Cities Marketplace hits in contributing through matchmaking, through financial support and everything, in supporting cities and projects to develop these things. But one of the other elements that are really important is the estimated break-even point. So is this just a project that will consistently run at a loss, or are we actually expecting to have a break-even point, so where we start generating profits and potentially points also where you start to pay back your the capital has been borrowed, or even making sure that there's the breaking point. This final point, the final 2 points here regard mostly the projects that already received financing or funding. So projects that maybe through grants by the European Union or maybe by other previous funders or investors, they already have other existing sources. So do they exist? Who were they issued from? And what is their share, let's say, compared to the existing project budget? So we understand clearly that if we have a project that is just counting on the existing grant to fund its operations, when the grant expires, if they haven't forecasted any cash flow, it can be really problematic. And in many times that we have seen, it's really the end of the project. So there's really a little risk of relying too much on grants or existing funding. So they are important for investors to understand whether there's been sort of like trust that's been put into the project by other entities. So that's really important. But at the same time, they cannot be the totality, let's say, of the budget that a project presents. And finally, once again, how much debt does a project carry? So if they already received loans by other entities, how much are they in respect of the overall project, and what are the conditions of the repayment of the debt that has already been issued. So these are already the baseline considerations to start do at the very beginning of the project before approaching investors. And of course, more considerations will be taken into account, but that's, let's say, the bare bones. So as key recommendations, to recap the session real quickly, before we move to your questions, our recommendations before raising capital. So before approaching investors, we would like you to pay close attention to definitely having up-to-date information, making sure that everything that we have presented is consistent across each other. Of course, expecting there will be cash flows needs to be documented, needs to be reliable, needs to be potentially verifiable, right? It's not sufficient to say that the market cap of the project is 2 billion. You need to show how we're going to tackle the specific market. Capacity to generate revenues, of course, but also the consistency. There's a lot of issues that might arise, for instance, with projects that may be very effective, but just on a seasonal matter. And investors really don't like that. They don't like to see projects that just generate revenues 3 months a year, and then the rest of the year relies on those simple 3 months, because it really increases the risk. of default, let's say, of not being able to repay back the debt that's been contracted. And finally, counterparty risk. So as we said, as we've mentioned, a smart city project, as Eelco also said, really takes into account a lot of stakeholders, a lot of different counterparties into the same city, into the same region. So it's really important that we manage to take that into account, into costs, into potential cash flow generation. How relying are we on external parties? How relying are we on external organizations for our projects to function? So it's really important also to take that into account, and it contributes to the investor making, let's say, an accurate assessment of the creditworthiness, of the viability of such project, and determine finally whether this is bankable or not. As steps forward, Cities Marketplace is currently working at also a solution booklet, which Giorgio was also mentioning before, that will be relying on helping small to mid-sized cities develop their financials and working together to raise capital. So this is an upcoming project. Of course, I'm not saying that it will be out as others are already out, but it's definitely something that you might be looking forward in the future. And yeah, so once again, thank you for being here today. I think it's all on my end, and we can probably open the room for questions.
Thank you very much, Tomaso. So now it's time for your questions. I saw that we have one question from Max. I don't know if you want to do the question, open your microphone and do the question, or do you want me to read?
I can read the question. Maybe not everybody has read it. Thank you so much, Jorge, and also from Tomaso and Eelco. Thank you for the interesting presentations. I think this is more generic, so we don't have to spend a lot of time to answer this question. But my interest is how does the Smart Cities Marketplace address the growing skepticism over technology's role in urban planning decisions, especially with, I think, a lot of people know this example of the sidewalk labs, which was, propagated as it was a waterfront redevelopment district in Toronto, which was super smart, but also climate neutral. But the city of Toronto, after a lot of skepticism, actually pulled out the trigger. And I think something that a city like that, there's a lot of skepticism around the idea of smart cities, whatever that entails, right, is extremely risky, right? Also from a financial perspective. So you obviously have the kind of more democratic perspective, more the kind of the moral, ethical implications, but at the same time, you also have the financial investors implications, is that, a city starts to do something like this. So yeah, in this way, it kind of relates more to the idea of a bankable project as well.
I don't know who wants to go first.
Maybe well, that's just good start, Max. Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, actually. And also that example, the Toronto example, is probably sort of a nightmare vision sort of what could be done. And I think, what the Smart Cities Marketplace, I mean, we are a marketplace. We are not sort of a normative. So what we do is translate lessons learned towards cities as well. And clearly we're sort of bound by European policies as well. So having this participatory, democratic way and educational sort of approaches, so to also educate citizens, about the dangers and also benefits of technology in general, is, I think, a key element also of the Smart Cities Guidance Package. And in the end, it makes projects sustainable and therefore more attractive to people like Tomaso as well. Now, I'm not sure about, I don't know the details of the Toronto example, whether that's, maybe it's was also an issue at the interpersonal level between the project teams and as well, and the sort of stakeholder management issues that you might have there. I don't know the details of that. What I do know, and I think I just wanted to point you, Max, to an initiative that's called the Digital Trust for Places and Routines, which is actually aiming to provide transparency. And I'll just put the link in I think you might find that interesting.
Yes, please.
DTPR. So basically the idea there is that if there's any camera or a sensor in the public space, they have set up a standard, so with icons. So what does this thing do? I mean, what does this camera do? Is it, does it do face recognition? Yes or no? Is it encrypted? How long is the data stored for? And they have created the standard for all kinds of IT applications in the public space. And I think that could be a contributor to sort of instilling trust, because if you do that as a city, open up why you are using this stuff and what it is used for, that actually can contribute to sort of reducing anxiety as well. It's an educational element there as well. Having said that, so Smart Cities Guidance, Smart Cities Marketplace is neutral in a sense. So we're trying to sort of promote participatory approaches as well. So it's probably sort of, you could call it European in a sense. I'm not sure whether George and Tomaso want to contribute to this discussion.
Tomaso, do
you? Yeah, maybe if you want to start, George. I think it's on my end, it's more related to the financial standpoint. So yeah, if you want to start, and then I can complete.
No, to be honest, I do not have a technical. I'm not a urban planner, so I'm not used so much on this urban planning exercise. What I know is that and from the experience, we cannot rely on technology. Technology does not solve all the problems. So citizen engagement, stakeholders, the involvement, those are key parts of a successful project. Without those, you can have what kind of technology you have, can be the smartest technology, but if you don't listen to people and their anxieties and trying to understand, they're part of the process, whether that's a simple energy project or a complex artificial intelligence project. So both of them, you should listen to the stakeholders and make sure that you comply with their requirements, anxieties, or their problems. If not, usually projects are not so successful. But to be honest, I don't know that project specifically, so I cannot answer anything more specific. So Max, I'm not sure whether we answered your question.
I think we addressed parts of it, but I think also a general question of, right, what does a smart city mean? What is the goal you strive for? How do we use technology? To what extent, like for example, do we use data as a commodity, right? Because that could provide us also bankability to a project. You of course have energy efficiency and energy productivity, but then again, a smart city in itself also kind of, at least it gives me the idea that there could also be bankability by collecting data, right? So I think these are important considerations, right? When you are having what kind of product do you have in mind, and how do you deal with these? Yeah, I think issues. I think this is just a question you need to answer yourself, obviously, but that's what you've done. But I think this is. But yes, you answered partially my question. But I think it's just interesting to see what you're.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it is very interesting, and let me just say something. For instance, using the data, it can be a good opportunity, so it can increase the bankability of the project, but also can be considered as a big risk because there are a lot of regulations about it. So from the point of view of the investor, depending on what you do on the data and how you storage, how you manage that information, can be on both sides. So all of this can be considered a risk or a benefit. My experience, and that's something that we try to highlight during the master class, is also that you should always try to put in paper what are the risks, even if there are risks that they might not occur, but if there is some probability, you should put them. But also all the benefits, whether that's air quality, whether that's data that you can use for something else, whether that's health. So it's not just about cash flows, but also all the other benefits. You should gather them, because there are investors that might find them interesting because they might have other ideas, or might find them risky, so they might have some questions for you. So that's my takeaway from what you were just saying now. Now I would like to give the floor to Leonor. So I saw that Leonor has raised her hand, so you can introduce yourself and make the question. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. So I'm Leonor. I'm joining from Sweden, from Cleantech Scandinavia. We have a network of investors and kind of promote the flow of capital to clean tech, mostly companies, but also projects. And I'm curious to hear, in your experience, how developed does the bankability kind of study of a project have to be for investors to engage? Like, does it basically have to be clean and ready, you know, with all the capital flows kind of mapped out, or will investors engage as a partner in developing the business models as well?
So Tomaso, I can give you the floor on this one. Then I can also give the view of the past experience of this 600 million. But Tomaso, I will give you the floor first.
Sure. So well, first of all, thank you, Leonor, for this question. So from what we can see currently exchanging with investors, let's say for not just for this smart city project, but also for other ones, it's true that they are not too strict in the sense of having, you know, a perfect Excel spreadsheet with everything perfectly modeled and so on. But it goes to the benefit of the project itself to have done, let's say, some due diligence, to have done some like pre-structured research, let's say, on their end. It also helps them to prepare and better and make a better project for sure. What we can do as Smart Cities Marketplace is really helping projects that have really no idea where to start from, right? To map out these cash flows, understand where they can generate them from, or like make them, provide advice on how to make them a bit more structured. That's for sure. Once again, investors, especially investors such as, I don't know, public development banks, or even, let's say, engaged and impactful investors, they understand the difficulties of small size cities, that what they have, and that most of them don't have in-house capacity to do a, like, I don't know, very accurate modeling. But yeah, so I wouldn't say that they're too strict in this sense, but at the same time, you know, it's on their benefit to do more, and we can help. Maybe George, on the past experience.
Yes, so that's a key discussion that we had along this process, and actually that depends a lot on the project itself and on the investor. What type of investor are we talking about, and what kind of projects are we talking about? Our experience told us that there are investors that really like to have projects that are very mature, so they have the business case very well developed, cash flows, etc., so they can be presented in a way that they can engage. So they are not there to shape the project itself. They are just to confirm things and invest. That's usually the case of big infrastructure investments, where they like to see all of that data. They usually sometimes even prefer when you already have a due diligence, or when you already have external views of that project. So they are really up to it. But there are other investors who like to go a bit earlier on the phase, so that they can shape, they can understand what are the cash flows, so they can understand, they can help you design that process. So I would say that there is not a kind of one way to see this from our experience from the different investors. And for that, we have developed what we call the project maturity level. So it's 6 maturity levels that goes from I just have an idea, so this is an idea, an opportunity, to I have all the tender documents ready, so I can launch my tender just now, and you can join this tender. So it's somewhere in the middle. It's where most projects are. In some cases, they are too early for some investors, or they are in a good shape for those investors. So that depends a bit on the investor. And then this also there is a big difference when we talk about infrastructure or we talk about venture capital, for instance, or on equity, those types of investments. Because you were saying, Leonor, that you invest in projects or companies. So when you invest in companies, are talking about venture or equities, and those are big. There are big difference there because we are investing in a company, so it's a completely different view, and also on that space, that's where probably you have completely different types of investors. Some that goes very early, some that like to have more mature things. So that's yeah, even I would say that there the range from this maturity level can be higher, but of course, as and to sum up, as better you have developed the project, more opportunities you might have. So it's good for you to have a strong pitch, and when I say pitch, it's not a Shark Tank pitch of 3 minutes. It's a document where you have all the information that is required, all the business models, stakeholders. So if you follow, for instance, the Smart City Guidance Package or similar documentation that is available, you will see that you need to structure from the concept, the idea, until your specific project there and what it entails. So as if it's better developed, I would say that the opportunity is higher. I don't know, Eelco, if you want to just because you were also involved
No,
in
it's
this process.
just maybe
So.
an addition. So because Leonor, we also have in the Smart Cities Marketplace is like a self-assessment on your own project maturity level itself.
Mhm.
Now, that at least gives you some self-insight. So you know what type of, given what George was just saying, what type of investor is best suited given your project maturity level. So there's definitely that self-assessment. It's like a little Excel thing as well. It's quite easy to fill in, and so it helps you to sort of, okay, I'm here. So that means I can't be speaking to investors that want a full perspective, so to say. Or I'm here, so that enables me to be speaking to investors, that are sort of willing to help shape my project. So yeah, that self-insight is, I think, a good starting point.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. So we are just in time, so we have 1 minute of our presentation. I would just like to share again the invitation for our masterclass. So you have our matchmaking event, matchmaking at smartcitiesmarketplace.eu. So you just drop us an email of your interest, and we will we have a list of people that are trying to register. So please check, and if you are of interest, register. It's more or less 2 days. The first day, we will have different views from developers and investors, and on the second day, sorry, that will depend a bit on how it goes the first day. So it's never a master class. It's always different from the other, because we try to adapt it to the people that we have and to the questions that might rise on the first day. So the second day, sometimes it's more hands on the job, sometimes it's bringing new investors. That depends a bit on the public that we have attending. And don't forget to follow us in our social network. So we are a bit everywhere. Register for our newsletter and keep updated on next events. And again, I would like to thank now to Tomaso and Eelco for your excellent presentations, and thank you all for joining us on this session. Feel free to join in the afternoon another session. So we have more 3 parallel sessions. Please do join one of those, and see you around. Thank you all.
Thank you.